Well, Osama bin Laden's death has raised many a question about our Afghan war strategy. But Senator John Kerry says one thing is for sure. It was a game changer.
Osama bin Laden's death was more than a critical triumph in our fight against terrorism. It provides a potentially game-changing opportunity to build momentum for a political solution in Afghanistan.
Well, the most critical issue for the U.S., of course, is when and how to bring our troops home and how many might be left behind in such a withdrawal. And for more on our U.S. strategy in Afghanistan, we're joined by today's specialist, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican from Illinois, recently returned from a trip there where he met with General Petraeus and the troops. The congressman has also served our military in the Air Force Special Ops, Air Combat Command, and the Air National Guard. Our panel remains with us as well. Congressman, the numbers that they're floating around by all accounts are, 5,000 troops to leave in July, another 5,000 in December. We've got 100,000 on the ground, and I know that those 5,000 numbers haven't been committed to. That they're real. I don't want to over even sell those numbers, but that hardly sounds like a withdrawal.
No, and hey, Dylan, thanks for having me. Look, I think the key is right now it's important for leadership on the ground to go through all kinds of strategies. Okay, if we begin to pull out, what can we pull out where we can maintain the gains we have, continue to make gains, build a stable Afghanistan, or at least an Afghanistan that can begin to stand on its own here and root out corruption. But where do we need to go with that? I think, it may be unfortunate that we're releasing the numbers right now, but I think the key is to find out what do we need to do to begin to wind down there, but wind down under conditions of victory. I think the key here is we are on the verge. We killed Osama bin Laden. We're on the verge of winning in Afghanistan. I sure hope, and it looks like it's improving. So what do we need to do that safely?
And I guess my first question to you is define winning.
Well, I think winning is when Afghanistan can begin to stand up and hold off the Taliban, hold off al-Qaeda with limited United States help and ultimately with no United States help. It's just like in Iraq. I remember folks saying, well, what is victory in Iraq? Well, victory in Iraq is when they can begin to have a government to do that. Let me just say something quickly about Afghanistan. We've been looking at an Afghan kind of a national police strategy, and the problem is it's so tribal there that in many cases it's done on a local level. So when I was in Afghanistan just recently, in fact, the night before Osama bin Laden was killed, special operations are beginning to stand up local police strategies where you have local folks standing up and taking control of their villages, similar but not exactly like what we saw in Iraq with the Sons of Iraq, and we're seeing some very big progress here. I wish we'd have done this a few years ago. We didn't. We are where we are now, though, and I think we're seeing some improvement.
Karen, go ahead.
Well, one of the things, Congressman, I wanted to get your thoughts on, we heard coming out of the bin Laden operation was the important role that enhanced ability to get more intelligence from on the ground, how that actually helped our operation. Is there a path potentially in Afghanistan where perhaps it's fewer troops, but maybe building up our apparatus to get better intelligence so that we can be more strategic?
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to be able to pull our troops out and to stay there and maybe counterterrorism kind of things. But here's the thing to keep in mind, and I talked to some of the leadership there, I talked to generals there and asked that question. What if we go from a counterinsurgency to counterterrorism? Counterinsurgency is what we're fighting now. Counterterrorism is where we have strike forces that can go out and, kill or capture bad guys. And it's basically like playing whack-a-mole. They say at that point you'll lose a lot of the gains you've made. Sure, you can just kill bad people. We get it. You can capture bad people, but you lose what you've gained. So I think we can ultimately get to that point. Look, I want to be out of Afghanistan as bad as anybody else, but I want to leave Afghanistan under a condition of victory, or at least under a condition of a stable Afghanistan, so that we don't do what we did after the Soviet invasion, where it ends up kind of devolving into a mess, and we have to go back in 10 or 20 years. I don't want my kids fighting the war in Afghanistan again.
One thing that I think people, when they learn it, it really is upsetting, is the following. And I'm sure that you're aware of this. The supplies of materials into Afghanistan go in by way of truck through the Khyber Pass largely. They don't get flown in. They're driven in. That is the only road basically in, which means that if you are the bad guys, whoever the bad guy of the day is, if you want to go pick up an American truck with some stuff on it, whether it's toilet paper or gasoline or bullets or whatever it is, you know where to go. Right. I was speaking with an executive in another senator's office who had just returned from a trip similar to the one you were just on. And he said, listen, The thing that was most disheartening for us was to learn that a third of all the trucks that come in get picked off, and that the other two-thirds of the trucks get in by paying a bribe. So the implication is that the Taliban, or whoever this is basically saying, okay, we need supplies. Let's take the things we actually need from the Americans that are generic, like gasoline and toilet paper, from those trucks. And then for the things that are not useful to us, let's collect money so that we can then take our gasoline and our toilet paper and buy whatever we want from the Iranians or the Russians. And that pipe of trucks is, in effect, a pipe of U.S. taxpayer money going through the Khyber Pass into that country that is funding and developing both sides of that war. And in that context, it is very hard for people to feel confident that engagement on this level is beneficial. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand the concern. I would take question with the numbers, but maybe it's right. I just don't know.
Whatever it is,
but I know one of the things we have to do as a future strategy, and something that we're working on in a very big way, is moving a northern pass in and to be able to get supplies in from a different area of the world. Look, right now we're relying on Pakistan, but Pakistan is harboring in many cases Taliban. Right. So it puts us in between a rock and a hard place. We have to develop that northern route, that route in from other places. Georgia, Azerbaijan play a very important role in this, and some of our other allies, strategic partners. Yeah. And the president's doing a good job of building that. Let's build that so we can reduce our reliance on Pakistan and reduce, frankly, our vulnerabilities there.
Jimmy.
Congressman, you just mentioned the issue of Taliban being over in Pakistan, and if you look at the map of Afghanistan, you got China to the northeast, you got Iran to the west. I guess my question for you is, you're a military guy. I went to the Citadel for undergraduate, and one of the things that we were taught in the art of war, the battle of war, is that you win when they surrender. Do you actually think that the Taliban is ever going to surrender to us?
I don't know. It's just like when you say that, will al-Qaeda surrender? I mean, look, there will always probably be elements of some kind of al-Qaeda to some extent. But we put them against the ropes. We hit them hard when we killed Osama bin Laden, so they've been degraded. The Taliban, is the idea going to continue to exist? Who knows? But I know when we have an Afghanistan, and again, we have to deal with the Pakistan question to get to this point. When we have an Afghanistan that through its local, through its national government, once we root out corruption as well, and I can talk about that, but that can stand up and do some of this fighting on their own with limited United States help and ultimately with no United States help, that's kind of the war of the 21st century. That's the new warfare. And so it may not look exactly like Sun Tzu or whatever, but this is how it is nowadays.
You mentioned a stable Afghanistan, and that's where we could leave. I just can't imagine a stable Afghanistan in any of our lifetimes. So if that's the case and we kind of accept that, which I think most people do, how do we allow a lot of our elected officials, both Democrats and Republicans, to kind of move their positions and say it's time to get out of Afghanistan, but kind of maybe use the counterterrorism discussion that Karen brought up to do that? I mean, is that a way for them to kind of get out of this gracefully?
Well, every congressman and senator has to make that decision on their own. I personally would disagree with that decision, but each person can determine that, hey, if they want to leave as a congressman, an independently elected person, they can make that decision. I've got to say, though, after 10 years of warfare there, and I know it's a long time, but with the progress we're making and after the sacrifice that's been made, I think a precipitous pullout now for the sole purpose of saving face would be very counterproductive. We can win there. Is it going to look like stability like we think of here in Washington, D.C., a stable government that is a well-oiled machine? Probably not, but it's going to be their version of stability. Look, in the Afghan National Parliament, they recently had somebody on national TV read aloud the names of people who were involved in the Bank of Kabul scandal out loud and expose corruption. That is a very positive move in an area of the world that's not used to that kind of sunlight and honesty. So we're making some progress, but look, this isn't going to be a walk in the park. It never has been.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much. Adam Kinzinger out of Illinois. Thank you, sir. Next, the other piece of the puzzle, Pakistan. Christine